Hello and welcome to this month's Support Coordinator webinar. I'm Vicky Gray and I'll be your host for today's session, proudly presented by Endeavour Foundation. To kick off our first webinar of 2025, we're excited to dive into the topic of connecting clients with rewarding work with our guest presenter, Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. As we gather online with attendees joining us from across Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the significance of the lands we call home. If you'd like to honour the traditional custodians of the land you're logging in from, feel free to share their name in the chat. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi people, traditional custodians of the land on which I'm hosting from today. In the spirit of reconciliation, Endeavour Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, before we get started, a quick bit of housekeeping. Your microphones and cameras will stay off, but feel free to connect in the chat and share your thoughts. If you have questions for Mary, pop them in the Q&A section and we'll cover them after the presentation. You'll also find a link to our privacy policy in the chat. If you have any questions about it, just feel free to reach out. Now, before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to steer you towards our previous webinar recordings. They are full of valuable insights, strategies and tips on a range of topics. You can now catch up on all the recordings on our YouTube channel. So check out the link in the chat and start exploring. As mentioned earlier, during this webinar, we're going to dive into the topic of connecting clients with rewarding work. Our presenter today is Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. Shortly, Mary will be covering techniques for evaluating client readiness for employment, how to develop effective support plans tailored to individual clients, and strategies for connecting clients with suitable job opportunities. But before handing you over to Mary, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Alicia Coombs-Marr. Alicia is the General Manager of Inclusive Employment Solutions at Endeavour Foundation and leads a team to establish inclusive employment opportunities for people with disability, both within Endeavour Foundation and external workplaces. Over to you, Alicia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Vicky. I'm really excited to be here with you all today to talk a little bit about rewarding employment at Endeavour Foundation. So I thought I would start today with a little bit of a snapshot of employment at Endeavour and really talk to you about one of the key pillars of our strategic plan as an organisation. So you can see on the slide there, we've got our really important tagline up at the top around more people we support have a paid job that's right for them. So we are absolutely focused on supporting people to find employment and find the job that's right for them. So we recognise that everyone has different career goals. And that career goal might be something based on one of our Endeavour employment sites or in an external organisation, but we want to try and support people in all of those settings. So we've been supporting people with disability for almost 75 years, and we really understand how important having a job that you love is to people. So at the moment, there's only about 20% of NDIS participants who are working age that have a job. And we really want to work to increase that for people and open up those opportunities. So you can see some of those stats for us that we currently have over 1,600 employees that we support both within our workplaces and in external workplaces to Endeavour as well. We have a number of sites that we run across the eastern seaboard primarily. So you can see it on the map there. We've got all across Queensland, in Western Sydney and then Greater Melbourne. But we also run a program with the Defence Department, which is a really wonderful opportunity for people where we work across all states and territories except for Tasmania. So we do have more opportunities across Australia as well. We have opportunities, as I said, both internally, but we also support people externally. We also offer internal traineeships, which provides an opportunity for people to upskill as well. We also have our own resource and recycling centres. So we also provide opportunities for people to develop their skill sets there, which has also got a lot of really great customer service opportunities. All of our sites do a variety of different employment opportunities to suit people's needs and areas of interest. So that can be anything from packaging to timber opportunities to catering. We have an art gallery as well, and we have administration roles too. Karen, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. So I thought I'd just give you a high-level snapshot today around the different employment pathways we currently offer to people. So as I said, we've got a number of different opportunities, and that can range from opportunities on our run disability social enterprise sites. So those sites are, as I showed you on that map before, they're all across Queensland, and then they're in Melbourne and Western Sydney as well. Those sites, we do some pretty awesome work around different packaging and manufacturing, sewing, the art gallery that we have. We do catering and cooking. And in each of those different opportunities, there's different ways that we can job carve for people as well, and then map out their development opportunities too. We also have supported hosted employment opportunities, and these are roles where people are based on sites that are external to Endeavour Foundation, but we come along and provide the support that they need to be successful in that environment. So some examples of things that we do in that space are we work in some aged care facilities, in the laundry and in the cafe. We also work with engineering and construction companies where we support on site with different opportunities as well. The next step that we tend to see in people's career opportunities that they're interested in is reducing the support that they require and working in mainstream employment, but they may still need some level of support. So people will be out in mainstream employment, but we can still come along and support people on an ad hoc basis or, you know, for minimal hours in the week that they need that as well to really support that transition. Then we also look for people to transition out into mainstream employment if that is their goal, and support them with what that looks like and what development opportunities they have there too. So for us, we have more roles that we're always looking for. We're always looking to expand. We're going into different sectors as well and really try and do that based on what people are interested in doing. We've got more roles than we've got people for at the moment, so we're really keen to talk to anyone that's interested in employment, even if it's just really initial exploring conversations around what could it look like for someone. So if you are at all interested in talking to us about potential opportunities both now and in the future, if you want to just pop a yes in the comments section in this chat for the webinar, we'll get in touch with you after today so that we can talk a little bit more about what that could look like and what opportunities there are available with us. Thank you so much for your time today. I know that was a really short snapshot, but we're really keen to talk to anyone that's interested. So I'll hand over to Mary now to take us through the rest of the session.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming along. I can see a lot of people are putting yes in the chat, which is just amazing. Thank you so much. That was really interesting, Alicia. Really good to see such a variety and a really quite holistic approach based on what stage people are at, which is just fantastic. Okay, so we're going to make a start. So today we're going to focus on connecting clients with rewarding work. Let's get going. Okay, right. So as part of this webinar, I suppose something just to be mindful of is that I do refer to a participant as in a general term. So when I say this, I'm also referring to a participant in relation to who might be acting on behalf of that person or their extended support network. So that could be nominees, carers, parents, friends, whoever that might be. Okay, So for this webinar, or for the focus of this webinar, I'm really going to focus on what might be available through the NDIS funding, just to start with, just to give you some ideas, because there's quite a few people that I talk to aren't really aware of what's available. But also I'm going to talk to you a bit more and really focus on the skills for a support coordinator. So what is the best practice around supporting someone to explore their employment opportunities or their goals? Okay. So for participants within the NDIS, there are a number of options available within the NDIS price limits and pricing arrangements, which we often refer to as the price guide. This is funding that a participant would have access to, and it's generally allocated on a participant's plan, specifically when they have a goal to finding or engaging in or exploring employment opportunities. So I've given you some examples here. So it's probably the one that people are most probably the one that most people know about is in the core assistance with social and economic and community participation. So it's in supports and employment. So it might be specialised supported employment, or it might be supports that someone needs to actually, maintain an employment. And there's also employment support through capacity building, finding and keeping a job. So there's employment-related assessments, counselling and advice. So that's more in relation to if someone's exploring some employment options and they don't know where to start, or they're not very clear around what the barriers might be for that person. Getting an assessment, and holistic assessment done focused around employment goals is a really good thing to do. There's employment assistance, including youth aged 15 to 25 years, and that's around transitioning. Transitional arrangements for school leavers, employment supports under employment assistance. And there's other support items available under employment assistance as well. So there is actually funding that support coordinators, psychosocial recovery coaches, or support workers can access. And it's for a support coordinator, it's in relation to, say you were working with a participant who has funding under finding and keeping a job, around employment assistance, and it's around someone that you have an existing relationship with, who you can support them and contribute to their employment success. So if you want more information about those, go and have a look in the NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits, or price guide. Okay. So throughout this webinar, like I said previously, we're just going to look at the skills that a support coordinator would need to successfully support a participant to access rewarding employment. Okay, let's keep moving. First of all, where you would start is evaluating a person's readiness for employment. To evaluate a client's readiness for employment, a support coordinator first needs to understand how to assess their readiness for employment, but also you're starting to identify any of the barriers that the person might face. Okay, so first of all, it's about understanding their readiness. So employment readiness involves assessing whether a participant possesses the skills, confidence, and resources to engage in workforce successfully. So when we're supporting a participant to build their capacity to be employment ready, we need to make sure that we don't make assumptions about what employment means to the person. The aim is to encourage a participant to share their interests and long-term vision of what employment actually looks like to them, using that person-centered approach. And that includes being actively involved in individual discussions with the person about their employment goals, what that looks like, what would the outcomes look like, what would it look like if it's successful, what kind of supports would you need, and what their aspirations are. So their goal might be just to be able to understand what full-time or part-time employment looks like, but their long-term aspirations might be actually having a career. So I suppose it's really just about starting to flesh that out and gaining some understanding from the person around their readiness. The next part is around assessments. So there are a number of ways that a support coordinator can assist a participant to assess their readiness for employment. So there are private services that a participant can use their NDIS funding for, and it's previously what I talked about, assessments, counselling and support. So there are comprehensive employment readiness assessments and counselling support. So it assesses assesses any barriers, and identifies the skills that a participant will need to be employment ready. So it might identify a gap in skills based on their employment goals. It might identify barriers and what kind of supports will be needed to overcome those barriers. So this is information and support. You can get also information and support through government funded services. So I'm sure most of you who are working with participants who want employment goals, there's a lot of employment services out there. So Workforce Australia has employment service providers. They offer a range of skills training. There's disability management services and employment support services. And it's just an example. So if you literally go and Google employment services for people with disability, there's a whole range of things come up. There's also a whole range of services that are being funded around research and understanding the supports and networks that need to be in place for a really good, rewarding employment to be in place. In relation to a support coordinator, you can help a participant assess their readiness by exploring their past, doing things like, as part of that person-centered planning, starting to explore their past experiences in relation to work or volunteering or any kind of opportunities that they've had around that, understanding their hobbies, their passions, their desired roles. So asking questions like, what type of work excites you the most? What challenges have you faced in a workplace setting before? Because sometimes it's about people have work goals and it's around that expectation that society has, is that when you transition from school or as an adult that you'll gain employment. So it might be around really understanding what employment means to that person, because it looks different to all of us, but also understanding what it is that they would like to do and really trying to open up the opportunities for people to explore a range of options. Okay, identifying barriers. So some of the common barriers a participant may face in gaining employment are more likely to be skill gaps, lack of qualifications or training, and which is common for everybody. A participant also will come across other additional barriers like transportation, getting to and from somewhere, childcare, appropriate childcare, or access to assistive technology or adaptive tools. There also might be workplace concerns like accessibility or lack of inclusive practices. So it's really starting to, as part of that person-centered planning, always start with the planning, exploration, really talking about different options, what they look like, what they mean, doing that reality testing around how would that work and what would that look like, to really try and understand a really holistic focus around that employment goal. And also you're really starting to identify some of those barriers specific for that person. So once you get to actually understand the barriers a participant may be facing in accessing employment, this will assist you to identify the strategies to overcome those barriers. So these could be things like researching a course or support for a participant that they could access to develop the right skills for their employment pathway. They could be about identifying transport options available in their local area, or if appropriate, accessing assistive devices through NDIS funding. Supporting a participant, or it might be about supporting a participant to advocate for workplace modifications, such as flexible work hours or accessible facilities or being able to work from home. Okay. Keep going. Again, if you have any questions at all, can you just put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Okay. Developing effective action plans. Okay, so people call these action plans, support plans, whatever you want to call them. I specifically call them action plans, because action plans come about after you've done that person-centered planning. So you've done that planning, you've really had those in-depth discussions, you've really explored all the options, understand from that person's perspective what they want, what employment means to them, what it needs to look like, what kind of supports that they're going to need, the barriers that they might face. And then you start to go, okay, so what are the first steps that we need to take? So the first steps in relation to an action plan is in relation to the person's goals. So in relation to a person's goals, their goals might be about gaining employment, but it's about setting achievable objectives, which involves breaking down those goals into actionable and achievable steps. So breaking them down into steps that are more achievable. Okay, I'm going to give you a bit of an example. So say you're working with a person who has an intellectual impairment, which impacts on their ability to problem solve complex situations, process and remember information. Their goal is to gain paid employment in a place where they can interact and talk with people, as they love having a chat and meeting with people, very, very social. However, the person has never had a job or even participated in any voluntary or other work experience opportunities, and they don't know what kind of role that they would like. They just know that they want a job. They want some paid employment. So the person is fairly independent, so they can access public transport and has completed some courses previously with extra help from student support services at TAFE. The person is an adult, makes their own decisions, doesn't have any informal supports, however, lives in a cell arrangement. Okay, so that gives you a bit of a context. So in relation to an action plan, the action plan could break down the goal into achievable steps. So I'm just giving you some examples about what it might look like. So the steps might include getting a work-ready assessment first to assess the functional barriers for the person and recommended strategies to overcome those barriers, identifying the person's strengths, appropriate roles, responsibilities, and considerations. So this means what safeguards and supports the person may require to access and maintain the paid employment. So this is really, really important. So the assessment isn't just about what are the person's goals, what is the impact of their impairment, how does that create barriers for the person. So, you know, it's more about also thinking about what appropriate roles might be. So if you've had working with someone with an intellectual disability and the impact of their impairment is in relation to, you know, they don't understand complex situations or processing information, remembering, then something with complex problem solving might not be as appropriate as something that doesn't have complex problem solving. So it's really about thinking, it would really help the person to really then kind of understand what are some of the roles that they would be more likely to be successful in. And it's not about limiting opportunities at all. It's about understanding what are the person's strengths, what are some of the opportunities that might be available, and also looking about what is the additional support that they might need. So if there's a role that they specifically want and there is some complex problem solving, then it's about, okay, so what additional supports can we put in place to support that person to access and maintain that role? Okay, hopefully I'm making sense. So also mapping out, so once you've got an assessment, you can then map out who within their support network can assist them to gain employment. So this could be, so if you're working with a person and they might have a psychologist that they can work with to help manage their emotions and ensure they make safe choices when they're employed. They might be a close friend who is keen to help. There could be a support worker who they have a strong relationship with that can support them through that employment process. So also it's about identifying opportunities for the person to explore what employment might look like. So it could be something like accessing a course to get work ready. And that it could be the support worker finding opportunities to volunteer based on the person's interests. So it might be about the person saying, well, I've had this assessment done, I'm really keen to get paid employment, and then through that assessment process and that counselling and support, they've decided that they'd really like to experience something first so they can get themselves into a routine and a structure so that when they do get paid employment, it will be more successful. So thinking about the minor step based on the person's strengths and the skills and their confidence and their abilities, putting in actionable steps where that person's at to ensure that that person, it's going to be more likely that the employment is going to be successful. Okay. So let's have a look at a role of a support coordinator. Okay, how are we going for time? Really good. Okay, good. So let's have a look at support coordinator skills. Okay. So the main role of a support coordinator in this scenario is to empower the participant to achieve their employment goal while ensuring their voice, preferences, and aspirations are central to all decision making. So really good person-centered planning. This involves providing tailored guidance, coordinating the appropriate supports, and fostering that confidence and independence. So ensuring that the person has the information they need when they need it, in the appropriate format that they need it in, so they can make informed decisions and choices about what they want to do. Okay, so understanding the person's goals and preferences. So some of the really skills that support coordinators need is engaging in the active listening to fully understand the participant's desire for employment and understanding what interacting people mean to them. So if someone's saying to you, you know that you've met with them, they're really social people and they love interacting with people, really diving deeper into the conversation and saying, well, what does that mean to you? How does it make you feel when you interact with people? What are some of the things that you need to think about when you're talking with people? Exploring the participants' interests, their strengths, and the potential workplace preferences to help them identify job opportunities. So when you're exploring and choosing employment options, providing clear and accessible information about different types of work environments that align with their interests. And this is very much what Alicia was talking about. Some people might be really keen in around like retail, hospitality, or customer service. Other people might be really, really passionate about animals or gardening or being out in the open. So it's really about, again, delving into their person's interests and the type of work environments and really opening up and exploring those opportunities. Also, coordinating visits to potential workplaces or arranging for job trials to help the participant explore and visualise these opportunities. And this would more than likely be linked in with job placement services like disability employment services to identify, entry-level roles that might match the participant's skill set. The thing that I have found from my experience of working with people with disability who are looking for employment opportunities and are linked into different employment services, it's about really supporting the person to have a voice. So be really, really clear about what they're looking for and the kind of role that they're looking for, but also being really, really clear around barriers that the person's facing. So sharing information around assessments, to make sure that support service is really, really clear about the level of support that person needs, and also making sure that the person with disability is part of those conversations. Okay. Building employment readiness. Okay. So supporting the participant in developing essential skills for the workplace, such as things like that we kind of take for granted sometimes, things like punctuality, communication, basic customer service. So really exploring some of those things with people with the person that you're working with, and really helping them to understand in this situation, what kind of things could you do, or in this situation, and have you had situations before when you've said something and people haven't been very happy, and how have you handled that? And so really helping people to problem solve some of those situations. Helping people to understand the workplace expectations, so including appropriate behaviour, dress codes, communication with colleagues and supervisors. And you can also, again, be doing this by collaborating with other services, employment services. So TAFE have really good student support services that you can link in with to provide additional support for people, especially if they're doing some training through TAFE around skill development, around employment readiness. So that's just an example as well. So, and also coordinating supports for ongoing success. So this is more around once a person actually is looking for employment. So you'll be working with the person themselves. So you're doing all that person-centered planning. You might have got assessments done, might be starting to explore workplace opportunities. You're starting to link them in with some supports and services. It's also looking at externally what's going on for that person. So coordinating with supports. So it's around looking at what supports and services that they're already linked into, and also what's that person going to need for ongoing success. So liaising with the participant's SIL provider to ensure that their daily living arrangements are compatible with their work schedule. So things like, supporting the person to get up at a regular time in the morning, enough time for them to get ready for work, making sure that the shift changes don't clash with when a person needs the additional support in the morning. So really collaborating with other service providers about how they can all work together to support that person to achieve their employment goal. Also collaborating with employers to arrange reasonable adjustments in the workplace. So there could be additional training, extended supervision, or even a quiet space to take breaks if the person needs it. And quite often this will be, from a support coordination perspective, is really supporting that person around having those discussions and having those conversations around, so what kind of supports do you think you would need in the workplace, and what would that look like, and how do you think you would manage that? And supporting that person to have a voice to talk about what kind of supports that they will need within that employment arrangement. And again, employment looks different for everybody. So ensuring, okay, I've got to move on. Here we go. Also ensuring participants' understanding and engagement. So collaborating with employers to understand how to break down complex information about employment processes into manageable, clear steps to help people with disability, especially when they have barriers around understanding complex information, to help them make informed decisions or to follow a clear process. So working with an employer to talk about how would you break that process down into small steps, and what kind of resources could you provide to support that person to have reminders or clarity about what their responsibilities are. Reinforcing the participants' understanding of their obligations as an employee, such as attending work consistently or communicating if they're going to be absent, respecting workplace policies. And lastly, fostering confidence and independence. So really encouraging the participant to celebrate small milestones, such as completing an interview or starting a trial shift to build that self-confidence. I've worked with a person, and the scenario that I gave you was very similar to someone that I've been supporting. And this person went through quite a few different interviews. And so we were very positive and really talking about, each interview process you go through, you'll become more confident. You will understand what the process is. You'll next time you'll think about something different. And so the person actually got a lot more confident in going to interviews and being able to advocate for themselves. Initially, the employment service actually went with them to some of those interviews, but after a while, the person was actually able to go to those interviews by themselves. So it's really just about building that capacity. And sometimes we actually negotiated starting some trial shifts. So there were a couple of situations with employment arrangements where with the employment service, we were able to negotiate with the provider for the person to go in for even half a day, just to see what it was like, because my perception, I understood what the responsibilities were for in the role, but the person that I was working with, they didn't have a clear understanding. Their perception was very different to the reality of what it was going to be like. And so we actually negotiated the person going in to see whether, first of all, whether that was something that they would be keen to do. And that really gave them opportunities and opened up their eyes and their thoughts around what they would like to do. And so they did trials, and they did half-day trials in the childcare centre one morning with support. and different kind of roles. And it really helped them to narrow down and think about, well, what are the things that I actually do like? What are the things that I think I like, but what are the things that I actually do like? And what are the roles that I think that I want to do, but what are the roles that I actually want to do? So it really helped them to narrow it down and be a bit more specific about what they wanted. And it really helped them to think about longer term, what their aspirational goals might be. Okay. The other thing is too, and it's something that Alicia actually talked about as well, which was really great. It was really great to see we fully supported employment right through to actually withdrawing those supports and creating that independence for the person. So gradually reducing reliance on external supports as the participant becomes more comfortable and competent in their role, promoting that greater independence. So providing the level of support that they need at that point in time, and then really reviewing that. And as the person gets more confident and creates more skills and feels has more ability to actually do activities within the workplace independently, then actually slowly withdrawing those services, setting up that structure and process. Okay. And then lastly, empowering the participant to advocate for themselves in the workforce. So once they become more confident, or really talking to the person about how they would advocate for themselves, but ensuring that they feel confident to communicate their needs or to seek help when it's necessary. Okay. So the overall aim of a support coordinator is to really adopt that person-centered, collaborative, and empowering approach to ensure that an individual is supported throughout the process of finding and sustaining. So finding, managing, and sustaining rewarding employment. Okay, hopefully that's really helpful. I'm actually going to go to some questions. Okay, I'm going to go to the Q&A. Okay, here we go. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to have a look at the Q&A. Okay, so Karen has actually dropped questions in. So if you put some in the chats, Karen's actually copied them over to the Q&A. So someone has said, usually disability employment services are for participants who have an intellectual disability, ASD. So ASD, so intellectual and so it might be developmental. What is they are intellectual competent but have physical disabilities? Are there services to help them? Yeah, there are a lot of support services around, and I suppose it's a really good point, because it's why I suppose the NDIS is talking about someone, if you're a support coordinator and you're accessing that funding through finding and keeping a job, it's really that you already have a really good connection and relationship with that person. So you already have an understanding about their impairment, how their impairment impacts on them and creates barriers. So they could be physical barriers, they could be psychological barriers, they could be intellectual barriers. There's a number of things that a person's impairment might impact on them on a daily basis. So when you're looking at employment, that's a really good place to start from. So what kind of services are we going to need to look at based on this person's unique situation? Okay, and there are a lot of employment services out there. And the other thing too is that if you're working with a person with a disability and they're not very clear about some of the barriers they might face, or they're not very clear about what they would like to do, going and looking at getting an assessment done first. So it's kind of like a functional capacity assessment, but it's more an assessment that would more than likely be done by a psychologist or an occupational therapist, but it's really focusing on the person's goals. So it has a specific focus, and it's around their functional capacity, but it's also around their aspirations, focusing on their strengths and their skills. What are the skill gaps? What are some of the barriers? How can we put strategies in place to overcome those? Okay. I'm assuming that the participant must have funding and capacity finding a job category to use services such as Endeavour. What if they don't? Can you use core? Okay, Alicia, do you want to answer that question? Are you still there?
Yes, happy to, Mary. each person is different, so funding is going to be relevant to what supports they require in the workplace and what support we're providing them. So yes, there is options to use core funding. So if that person who put that question in, if you popped a yes in earlier, we'll get in touch with you and we can have a chat about more specifically the person that you're thinking about and what supports they need at work.
Awesome. Thank you. Arlene, what would you advise a client who's hesitant to work with a fear that they will listen or lose their government incentives? I think it's a really good question, and I think, Arlene, it's really about having conversations about that, understanding where that fear comes from. Is it around losing their Centrelink benefit or their disability benefit? So really understanding, first of all, where does that fear come from? And what is it that they think that they will lose? And then really exploring what that actually means for the person. So if it's around their disability pension or if it's around whatever the incentive is, understanding what the criteria is, how that works, and really supporting the person to get some knowledge and information about that. So sometimes it's also about, really exploring for that person where that fear comes from, I think is the best place to start. Okay. What is qualification to be support coordinator and to be independent? Okay, I'm assuming you're talking about to be a support coordinator. If you go and have a look on the Support Coordination Academy website, or you can email me at info@scacademy.com.au, the email on there, I can send you information about qualifications to be a support coordinator or training that we have available. Okay, Arlene, do you have a free course for someone wanting to learn about support coordinator roles? No, we don't have a free course. We have a paid course because it's a very comprehensive. Our training is very focused on best practice principles, and it's very comprehensive. So our training is focused on a entry, so a beginner as well as an intermediate level. Covers a lot of content. So again, if you want more information, please email us. Hi, one of my clients is in last year of school and at the end of this year looking for supported employment. How to go about this? Great. So it's a really good question. So in relation to employment or any of it's especially around transition stages. So transition stages, going to school or leaving school, looking for employment goals. So it's really good as a support coordinator as a support coordinator, we often focus on what a person needs now. So what are the supports that they need, coordinating those, working collaboratively with the support network. But we also need to be looking longer term. So it's not just the current goals, it's also what are those aspirational goals. So aspirational goals, are more goals that might take a lot longer to achieve. So if you're working with someone and they've already talked to you about they would like to look for employment at the end of the year, now's a good time to start thinking about what that might look like. So starting to have the conversation with the person, starting to have that conversation again. Okay, so if you're looking for a supported employment, what do you know about it? Where can we find some information about it? Or starting to do some research about what services might be available, starting to explore with the person and their support network around what employment actually looks like for that person. What are the roles? What's their passions? What's their interests? So really starting to have that conversation because you've got a long time to lead into it. And really looking at when that person's plan's coming up for a review. So really talking to them about adding that goal to their plan if they don't already have it for their next review. And really being able to provide the NDIA in your reporting around, you've already started to have these conversations. This is what this person looks like. This is what the person, their goals are. There's kind of some of the thoughts that they already have, but you're already starting to identify what kind of supports that they're going to need. So that would be great going into a review process. So hopefully that helps. You can also go in and talk to employment services and gather information. So the more information that you give them now really helps them to start that thinking process going forward. Looking for information on becoming a support coordinator, can you please email me at info@scacademy.com.au and I'll send you all the information. Okay, Fernanda, as a counsellor, how can I provide employment-ready counselling? I think that's really something for you to explore, Fernanda. And I'm sure, as a counsellor, employment ready counselling, I think I would be really, from a counselling perspective, you would be looking more from a therapeutic perspective. So really looking about, really exploring their ideas around employment, their understanding, their insights, all that kind of thing. But I think it's really something for you to go and have a look at in relation to counselling, because there's different focuses, just like psychology, in relation to all those areas. I would also, you could go and talk to Endeavour and really talk to them about some of the supports that they provide. Okay, here's another one. Just keeping an eye on the time. So where do we access the assessment tools for comprehensive employment readiness? Okay. As a support coordinator, you would be doing those assessments. You would need to go and access those assessments. So I accessed a private organisation that was linked to an employment service. And so the person that I was working with went in, had about 3 or 4 sessions, or actually 2 or 3 sessions with a psychologist that was trained to do these comprehensive employment readiness assessments. And then we actually got a whole comprehensive report, and then we all talked together around, what are the person's goals, what are the aspirations, what are the roles that they want, their strengths, their interests, the barriers, all those kind of things. And then we then took that report, and we were able then to work with the employment service around really starting to drill down and target around what kind of supports this person would need, and when they would need those supports, and what kind of roles that they should be looking for. It really just helps. I found with the employment assessment, it really helped the person have a lot more insight and awareness around their abilities and their strengths and the things that they were really, really good at. And that really helped them to get quite excited about opportunities that might come along. I found it a really positive process, but sorry, I don't have any specific referrals. You would need to just go and Google that, or go and find some employment services, and they might have referrals or links to other services as well. Depends on where you are across the country. Okay, are you able to provide remote support via telehealth at all around evaluating employment? Are you able to provide remote? Am I able to provide that? Or are you sorry, I'm not quite sure whether you're asking me that or whether you could do that. I think that's something, the NDIA were really, really clear in relation to, if you're a support coordinator and you're working with a participant, that you already have to have an existing relationship with them. And I always recommend, wherever possible, to have face-to-face connection with someone. So it wouldn't be via telehealth. So you wouldn't be doing it with someone that's really, really far away. If you want to clarify that question, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to discuss it further. Are you looking at expanding into remote locations? Me, I don't do. I think maybe I've given the assumption that I do comprehensive employment assessments. No, I don't do comprehensive employment assessments. I was more referring to going and sourcing or engaging employment assessments for someone, especially if they've never been employed before, or they're not really clear what it looks like, or you're not very clear around their barriers, specific in relation to their goals, their strengths, their interests, any safeguards that might need to be put in place. Really, really good to go and explore those assessments. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Emma, if you want to email me again, happy to expand on that further if you want to have a conversation about that. Okay, okay, what advice can I offer to my young lady client who is passionate about pursuing art despite her parents' approval? I believe in empowering her to follow her interests and motivations. Coming from a background in Pakistan, she expressed her fear of pursuing a path that differs from her parents' expectations. It's crucial to address this issue and support her in finding a way to honour her passion while navigating her family's concerns. I need guidance. Okay, that's quite a complex situation, and I think I've come across this a number of times when I've worked with people with disability, when their parents, whether it's a cultural barrier or whether it's a cultural or belief or value that a family might have, or sometimes it's just a lack of understanding around the person's abilities or strengths, or it's around the family's lack of understanding around what that person can actually achieve if they have the right supports in place. So I think in relation to your young lady, you know, really empowering her to understand her interests and motivations in relation to art and things like that, it's fantastic. It might be about supporting her to access those who, you know, access something that she can be expressive and creative, so that she can actually show her parents that she's actually creative and expressive. They can really understand where the person's coming from. So again, sometimes it's around thinking around, well, what are the underlying issues here? Is it around a cultural barriers? Is it around a lack of understanding or awareness of that person's strengths and abilities? So really understanding what the underlying issues are, and maybe coming up with some creative ways to really help that person be empowered and express themselves through art. So there might be some opportunities within the local community that she can actually attend, and actually show her family what it means to her, and they can really see, you know, the strength that she has, the skills that she has, but also about what it actually means to her, and then building on from there. That might be one way to do it. Sorry, it's really hard to say anything if you don't really understand the context. But again, if you want to have a discussion about it, happy to have a discussion if you want to email me. I think the other thing is that when you're working with a person with a disability and they're living within the family home, it's that real balance to making sure that there's still that connection with the family as a unit, as well as supporting that person as your client. So it's about navigating that space so that you don't get the family offside. And that's really important because it's where the person lives and it's their family connection and support network. So again, I can see how that's challenging. But again, thinking about some other ways that you can actually show the family about what it means to that person. Okay. Sorry, starting to lose my voice. Okay, this will be the last one. A participant I work with only wants to work at one location. They are not interested in hiring him. How would you support him to be open to exploring alternative opportunities? I think, again, it's about having those realistic conversations, really understanding what are the underlying concerns for that person. So what is it about only working at that one location? What is it that they like? Is it the location? Is it the people that are at that location? Is it in relation to the work that they do? So really understanding what it is about that location that that person likes, really understanding about what it is that they're not interested in hiring that person. Are there any other opportunities? Really understanding if that's the reality, the person only wants that location and they're not interested in hiring them, really starting to explore the reality of the situation. So, you know, but again, once you understand what it is that they like about that location, you might be able to actually open up their eyes to other opportunities that might be available. So it might not be that location, but it could be somewhere else with the same context that they might want. So again, I think you need to start with, what is it about that location that they're adamant about? Because that really helps you to understand where you can go from there. Hopefully that's helpful, but again, it's really hard when you don't understand the whole context. So again, anytime you want me to actually come and explore things a bit further or have a bit more of a conversation, feel free to email me at info@scacademy.com.au. Thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Mary. That was amazing. I'm surprised you managed to keep your voice going for that long. There was a lot there that you had to deal with the Q&A section. So thanks for getting through them all. It's just a really thoughtful and engaging presentation again from Mary. It's clear this topic really strikes a chord with many of us. I have no doubt that everyone is walking away with valuable new insights after today. As Alicia mentioned earlier, if you have a client who is looking for work, we have plenty of job opportunities at Endeavour Foundation. So if you've commented yes in the chat, we'll get back to you shortly. But we've also popped an email address in the chat. So if you want to reach out yourself, feel free to do that too. Tomorrow you'll all receive an email with the recording of today's session, the PDF of the presentation, plus a link for the survey. We really appreciate hearing your feedback, as it really does help to guide us and continue delivering insightful future webinars. So keep an eye out for that in your inboxes tomorrow. We'd also like to invite you along to join us for our next webinar in March, which is impairment notices and their impact on participant supports. This will take place on Tuesday, the 11th of March at the same time, 12 to 1 AEST, or whatever is in your local time zone. Now, for anyone who missed it earlier, we've just reposted the link to all of the recordings from our Support Coordinator webinar series on our YouTube channel. Make sure to bookmark that link so you can catch up with any sessions you might have missed, and then you can revisit them whenever you need. And for those who want to stay up to date and enhance their support efforts, we've also shared a link to our fortnightly Care Connect newsletter in the chat. If you subscribe to that now, you'll also get valuable updates and insights and resources delivered straight into your inbox. On behalf of Endeavour Foundation, I'd like to thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm wishing you all a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you so much.
Hello everybody, welcome to our Learning and Lifestyle Hub. This is where we make learning fun.
Hi, my name is Andy. I love making Mexican. One day, I'm going on MasterChef.
Hi, I'm Grace. I live independently with support when I need it. I live my life my way.
Hi, that's Kevin. I live here. I like to go to the gym.
Hi, I'm Tricia. I love my life. I got the garbage shop. The high, the good.
I'm Clayton and I love rugby league. I'm normally kicking the footy around in my backyard. This is my home. This is my life. This is my community.
Hi, my name's Jeremy. My daughter's 3 years old. My daughter's proud that I come to work.
I like to go into work.
Hi, I'm Maddie and I work for the Endeavour Foundation. I come to work with a big smile on my face every day.
Love to work here because that's my new family.